Welcome to today's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast, your channel for super easy, no-nonsense advice on how to declutter and organise your home. Please welcome your hosts, professional organisers Ingrid Jansen and Leslie Spellman.
Hello and welcome listeners to episode 143 of the Declutter Hub podcast. I'm Ingrid.
And I'm Leslie.
If you have clutter and want to sort it out, this is the show for you. Now, in today's episode, Leslie and I are talking about safeguarding your personal details. This sounds very serious, Leslie. This sounds very serious.
It is very serious, of course, but it's something that a lot of people really struggle with and forms a barrier, doesn't it, to getting the job done? Because people are nervous about doing a big paperwork declutter because they fear the worst about what's going to happen to their personal details. So that's why we wanted to talk about different options, didn't we, for safeguarding your personal details, some decisions that need to be made, and certain products that you can use to help you along the way.
Yes, because I think we first need to talk about what are personal details. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is things with a name and an address, but it goes further than that, doesn't it?
Yeah, it could be your name, it could be your address, it could be your date of birth, it could be financial data, account numbers. All of those things are sensitive data, and that stuff can be stolen, can't it?
Yes, and it really, once people steal your identity, it can really become an absolute minefield. And then they can get mobile phones and access your bank details, and it gets really, really bad. So when we are decluttering, we need to think about how can we make sure that we minimize that risk, and what can we do ourselves to safeguard our personal details. And I think that's important to talk about in this podcast because there's decision making involved, isn't there?
Yeah, and ordinarily, when we're just doing standard day-to-day decluttering of paperwork, maybe a few pieces of paper a week, it doesn't become a huge deal, really, does it? But when we embark on a huge paperwork declutter, so you might be talking about years and years worth of documentation, you really have to be careful and you have to make some big decisions before you start that project.
Yeah, and I think the decision needs to be made. Do you want to shred everything? Or are you like, well, people know my name and know my address. You can even find that on Google Maps. You can find that on the computer. I'm not going to worry about a letter, which is the name and address. Or I'm only going to worry about financial things with financial statements and financial and documents and with dates of birth. Or I want to shred absolutely every last little piece of paperwork that has any type of detail on about me.
Before you get started on a big paperwork declutter, you really have to think through, don't you? What do I consider to be sensitive data? Because your name and address, for example, can be quite easily found on the internet. So many people think, well, I'm not too worried about my name and address. I'm just worried about more sensitive data than that. That's entirely up to you. There's no right or wrong way of doing this, but it's something that you need to think about because ultimately, shredding, destroying confidential data takes a lot of time in a paperwork project. And so we really need to have a plan before we start. We love a plan, don't we, Ingrid? We love to plan and prepare. And this is part of a paperwork project. What's going to happen? What do I consider to be sensitive data?
Exactly. So when you've decided you're going to declutter your paperwork and you've decided, okay, I want to shred stuff, then you need to think about, okay, what is the volume? Are we actually talking 10 pieces of paper here? That's not a difficult decision. Or is it actually a filing cabinet or box files full of paperwork? How much volume is going on in this project? Can you actually do it yourself? Do you have a shredder? Do you need to possibly buy an ID roller? Or do you think, oh my word, I've got a whole home office. It's going to be bags and bags full. I can never do this all by myself. I actually need to hire somebody to do this for me. And I probably need to outsource this shredding to make this project even feasible to start tackling.
Yeah, and so you've spoken about a few things there, Ingrid. I think we need to take a step back and we need to explain these things because a lot of our listeners won't even be aware that these kind of things exist.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk first about the ID roller. So we would use an ID roller with very small volumes of paperwork, wouldn't we? So that kind of week to week decluttering of paperwork, 10, 20 pages, something that's completely manageable. And we use what we love, something called an ID roller. You in particular love an ID roller, Ingrid, don't you?
Yeah.
You love your little ID rollers. So do you want to explain what that actually is and how it works?
Leslie, honestly, they're brilliant. And I actually I actually buy several and I give them away to people because I'm like, have you tried this ID roller? It's like so cool. And actually, I have a good working shredder. So I mainly use my ID roller for when I get boxes in. When you've got the stickers on the, for example, Amazon boxes or the packages that arrive, and you think, oh, there's my address and my details are on this sticker. How am I going to get this off? And you just take your ID roller and you zip over it. And boom, it's gone. Your details magically kind of disappear. You can buy them, and I like them so much that we've actually put them on our products we love page, haven't we, Leslie? I'm like, we need to get this idea roller in. This is amazing. People need to know about this. So if you look on declutterhub.com/products, you can see what an ID roller is. And you can buy them as one or a package of 3. You can even now buy them when you have these little refill cartridges, so you can top up the ink so it stays like properly rollable to use for many, many papers and boxes to come. But it's absolutely brilliant. And you basically wipe out your details. You can see how I'm excited about this I am, aren't I?
I feel like you should be on commission from the ID roller company to sell their wares for them. But yeah, basically it puts a layer of ink over an address and so that it becomes completely illegible. That's the way it works. So it's a quick rolling function that's going to roll over that address. So an ID roller is fantastic, as you say, for boxes, for packages where it's difficult to shred. You know, you can't shred a plastic package or a box, really, and you spend time faffing around trying to get the label off. It's a real faff, and so it's definitely worth the investment. So as Ingrid said, we do have that on our Product Suite Love page, so go take a look at that. Now, the next option for kind of mid-range volumes, let's say, Ingrid, would be a shredder. Now, there's different types of shredder. There's a rubbish shredder, and we all have had experience of what that looks like. And then there's an amazing shredder that's going to cost hundreds, if not thousands of pounds. And then there's one in the middle that's going to do the job. So we love a Fellows 60CS cross-cut shredder. Now, what does a cross-cut shredder do differently to other shredders, Ingrid?
Well, first of all, Leslie, I completely agree with you. There are shredders out there that are just so awful. If you have an awful shredder and you know it, just give up, because they just, after 5 pages, things get stuck and then they overheat. And then you're like trying to, with some sort of pen or something, try to get the little papers out of the little mechanism on the inside. And it's just a total nightmare. Have I made this mistake to buy a cheap shredder? Yes, I have. Yes, I have, Leslie. I will put my hand up and go, I made that mistake. I thought, yeah, I really need to do shredding. This was many, many years ago. I need to do the shredding because people started talking about privacy and about people stealing your data, and I need to get a shredder. So what did I do? Went to a shop, bought a cheap shredder and thought, I'm sorted. That was a big mistake. And of course, we learn from our mistakes. So the second time I thought, I think I need to spend some more money because I am just tired of trying to get little stuck papers out of a shredder when you shred like 5 pages. So yes, a shredder and putting a bit of money towards it. And we're not talking hundreds of pounds, probably 70, 80, 90 pounds. You are really sorted. There are a couple of good brands. We have one that we really, really like. Again, it's on declutterhub.com on the products we love. There's one we really, really like because we know it works really well. So what happens in my old cheap shredder, when you put a page in, you would just get these strips of paper. So a clever person could still put all the strips together and read the data. So then they kind of went, okay, we need to build machines that actually cross-cut. And that's when you get these tiny little bits of paper I mean, nobody would want to do that unless you may be like, I don't know, a spy or something, Leslie.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I can just imagine. Can you imagine spending time putting together pieces of shredding? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's really interesting actually, because really the bottom line is, who wants to go out and spend £100 or £70 on a shredder? It's just not something that you really want to invest in. But if you've fallen foul of a shredder, and I bet 90% of the people listening to this podcast are like, I know it overheats, they get stuck, you're there with your knife trying to prod it through, you fear for your life, you think you're going to get electrocuted. This is just, and then if you've got a small one, you've got to empty it every 5 minutes. It's just like, oh, a shredder can be the bane of your life, can't it? So we firmly believe, if you really want to safeguard your data and you want to do it in a way that's not going to completely frustrate you day after day, just invest in a decent shredder.
Yeah.
It's definitely worth it.
Yeah.
And a shredder is going to be used for mid-size operations, let's say. A shredder will say to you, oh, this will take 10 pages at a time. Our advice would be never put 10 pages in, because it goes, and then it gets stuck, doesn't it? It's like, even though it says 10 pages, it really doesn't mean 10 pages. It means we can just about do 10 pages, but I'm going to do a go slow. So whatever the number is on your shredder, sometimes it's 6, sometimes it's 10, halve it, and then you'll go much faster.
Yeah.
Honestly, trust us, we do loads of paperwork projects. And, you know, when we go into a house and we're like, no, please tell us that's not the shredder that we've got to work with. So I know we could literally just do a whole half an hour podcast on how terrible shredders are, couldn't we? Well, we need to move on. So if you've got a mid-size, if it's a manageable amount that you can shred, then use a shredder. Perfect. One piece of advice that I would do if you're doing a big paperwork project is do your paperwork declutter, put everything in a box, and then shred later, because it will really slow you down in your paperwork project. So don't try and shred as you go unless it's very, very small volumes. You know, I'm talking about a big kind of paperwork project that's going to span days here, that's going to have big volumes of paper where you're taking loads out of a filing cabinet. That definitely needs to be done. The shredding needs to be done separately, doesn't it, Ingrid, and not as part of the project? Because literally your shredder gets stuck and then it breaks, and all the things that we've spoken about that are freaking me out now. And so definitely leave the shredding till later. But there is another option, isn't there, Ingrid?
Yes, for sure, Leslie. You can also decide to outsource it. So if you're doing 20 years of paperwork and you know you've got a whole basement or loft or attic or a room full of paperwork, and it's years and years from company files to paperwork from family members that you've ended up with, and you're going to go, right, I'm going to do a massive project. My shredder, whatever size I buy, is never going to cope. I'm going to be here sitting shredding for like a year. Outsource it. Get a local confidential waste company on board. Just Google it, confidential waste in my local area, and I'm sure there's several companies that will pop up, and then you can go, right, I'm going to hire a company to shred this paperwork for me. This is not as expensive as you think it might be. So a lot of people think, oh my word, that's going to cost me hundreds and hundreds of pounds. Of course, it depends on the volume. But if you've just got a couple of bags, it's not going to cost the world, and you're going to save yourself loads and loads of time. Definitely get a local company, because of course, you know, that is amazing. And they are around. Normally, they give you a couple of options. Do you want us to collect it, take it with us and shred it on our site where we are, and then send you a certificate of destruction? Or is the data that sensitive that you actually want to see the paperwork go in the shredder in front of your house? They've got these trucks that shred on site, and you can see it go in, and then you know. So I think it really depends on the sensitivity of your paperwork. If you've got lots of patient files or files with paperwork, financials, etc., that's maybe when you think, okay, I need to invest some money and have it shredded on site, because it will be more expensive.
Yeah, so even domestically, if I'm doing a big paperwork job with a client, if it's at all possible, we will always outsource that shredding, because we don't want people to give up on the decluttering because of the shredding. Because I say it's a huge pain, isn't it, to
Yeah.
shred? It's just like, why would anybody want to do that? I mean, you can give it to your kids to do, well, depending on what age your kids are. You don't want to lose any fingers here. So, but you can get somebody else to do that. You can do shredding while you're sitting watching TV at night, those kind of things. But if you can outsource to a confidential waste company, then go for it. The other benefit really of outsourcing to a confidential waste company, they tend to give you a certain amount of bags. So the one that I use is like, you can have 8 bags, and that's 8 kind of mail sacks of stuff for about 60, 70 pounds. It's about $100 American. That's not that much money really for the amount of time that to shred 8 huge bags of paper would take forever. And so it's definitely worth it in my eyes. But the nice thing about that is not many domestic situations will have 8 bags worth of paperwork. And the nice thing about it is if you outsource that, you don't need to then take out envelopes and other bits of paper that have not got confidential data on them. You can chuck it all in and they'll shred the lot. And so that's quite nice, because that saves you time, because you don't need to sort confidential from non-confidential, if that makes sense. So another benefit of using, I think are we getting the point across that if you can outsource this, you absolutely need to do this. Trust us, we've done hundreds and hundreds of paperwork jobs, and it just is a game changer, isn't it, Ingrid?
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it makes a paperwork job is quite hard to do anyway. It's one of the hardest jobs to do, because a stack of paperwork is lots of decisions already as it is. Is it important? Do I need to keep it? Do I need to stay it? Where am I going to put it? Do I need to either recycle it or shred it? So many decisions. So if you can make the shredding part easy for yourself, I think, give that gift of time to yourself.
So those really are the 3. There's loads of options out there in terms of safeguarding your identity, but those are certainly the ones that we advocate. So an ID roller for very small volumes, a shredder, ideally a cross-cut shredder, and a decent shredder for mid-size volumes. And then if you've got large volumes, to outsource to a shredding company who will either shred on site or will take it away to their site and send you, in this country, what is called a certificate of destruction, to show that your identity has been safeguarded.
Mm-hmm. Now, there might be some listeners who think, but I burn my paperwork. So if that's you, if you're maybe have got an oil drum in your garden, or if you have got a fire that you do or something, maybe that's a solution for you to get rid of that paperwork you no longer want. I mean, I could not do that, Leslie, because I live in the middle of London. I don't think my neighbors are going to be really happy with me if I do that in the middle of my garden. But I know there's several people who are like, yeah, I just burn my paperwork. It's fine.
Yeah, burning it, certainly, if that's something that's allowed in your area, is certainly very, very helpful, isn't it? Now, there are other methods that people use, which I find a little bit dubious in terms of the amount of effort that they take, but we thought it was worth mentioning. So some people talk about putting paperwork into a bath in its entirety, and then kind of allowing it to soak, and then removing it from the bath, and all the ink has gone from it. Now that strikes me as a lot of work. Does that not strike you, Ingrid, as a lot of work? That's a real faff, isn't it?
I have read that people do this, and I always kind of go, really? Do people do that? Do you throw it in a bath and then put it underwater? And so it all gets one clump. And then I'm thinking, how do you it gets really heavy? And how do you get that then from your bath into a bag? And I find it a bit mind-boggling. So I mean, we wanted to mention it because we know there's people out there who do it, but I could not imagine myself doing that, Leslie.
Me neither. If you are listening to this podcast and you think, yes, I love the bath soaking method, please do let us know, because we want to hear. We've heard about it. It's like one of those urban myths, maybe, isn't it? But we really want to know about it. We want to know whether you're a paperwork soaking person to safeguard your identity. Let's talk about let's say that you're doing a shredding job, yeah? Where can the shredding go? Because this is another barrier as well that stops us in our tracks sometimes. And so we can only talk about what happens locally here in the UK, can't we? But What do you do with your shredding, Ingrid?
Well, I put my shredding in my paper recycling. But they do kind of advise, the problem is, Leslie, every council and every waste collection service is different, even here in the UK. So you really have to look at your local council and figure out, can I put my shredding in my paper recycling? Or do they advise to put it like in a box or in a cereal box so all the little bits and bobs don't fly away everywhere when they actually empty that recycling bin? So I normally put it in some sort of paper bag, or I'm very careful that indeed when I bring it outside to my recycling bin, it doesn't fly all over the place, because especially when it's windy, it can it can fly everywhere. So you have to figure this out locally to where you are. What can you do with this?
I don't think that the reason why you can't put it into the bin is because of it flying away. I think the reason is when it gets to the machine, the recycling machine at the recycling plant, the shredded paper is too small to be processed at the other end. And so that's not the case everywhere, because there's obviously different types of machines, isn't there, in different councils that deal with it in different ways. But I certainly know that you need to check in your local area whether or not you can put shredded paper into your paper bin.
Yeah, I think definitely. And somebody had a really cool solution for their shredded paper, didn't they, Leslie? Because they actually brought it to a pet sanctuary because they had guinea pigs that needed shredding paper or something. But I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, because if you think about it, once you shred paper and you empty it, it kind of becomes almost like a animal bedding, doesn't it? Small animal bedding then, I guess. And so I think it was guinea pigs or rabbits. I'm not sure. Somebody who's got guinea pigs or rabbits will let us know. But things like that. So that could be an option as well if you can't put that into your paper bin, because it's quite hard then, isn't it, to put it into your non-recyclable waste if you're not allowed to put it in your paper, and you feel bad about it, because particularly if you're doing a big paperwork project, because that is a lot of waste. So yes, how exciting to talk about confidential waste and shredding, Ingrid.
Yes. I have one more question, Leslie. Do you shred with or without staples?
Well, I shred with staples because my shredder will take staples. So that's another thing that you need to look at when you're buying a shredder, isn't it? Does it accept staples? Because that's a big one as well. Because if you've got to remove all the staples, then that's another faff, isn't it? So it's all about just making things easy for yourself. And sometimes it's just worth that extra investment in a shredder, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. So listeners, are you feeling inspired to shred now? Or are you thinking to yourself, I'm actually planning a big paperwork project. This was like the perfect timing for this podcast, because I now need to think about my shredding situation or my ID roller situation, or I need to Google my local shredding company so I know what my plan is going to be, because it's all part of the preparation of a project. So that's it for this episode. We hope you've all enjoyed listening and are inspired to take action. And we appreciate you listening today. So if you've enjoyed this podcast, please share it with others. Maybe your friends and family would love our show too. And on our show notes page on our website, you can find all the sharing buttons. If you want more handy tips and advice from Leslie and I, you can find us in lots of places. We have a fab supportive Facebook group called the Declutter Hub Community, which is a great starting point. You can also find us on Instagram. We have a Facebook page. We have our own YouTube channel as well. Just search for @DeclutterHub. Take a look at members.declutterhub.com to find out more about our Declutter Hub membership. If you don't want to miss the next podcast episode, subscribe to the Declutter Hub podcast and it will pop into the notifications each Friday. So thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast. Check out declutterhub.com for more inspiration, and don't forget to tune in next week.